Hi, WoW Soloist here, and here is a really fun lore video. This could well be totally wrong, but boy is it fun and it seems to fit the facts. Spoiler alert, just before we jump into this, I don't even want to give you the real title of this. If you don't want to see a spoiler that, if it's right, could change 9.0 and 10.0 for you, perhaps, then, be guided by that information. So, the real title of this video is Xal'atath Impersonates Sylvanas. So, the thesis here is that Sylvanas has huge godlike powers, but only in H25 and the 9.0 cinematic teaser trailer. Otherwise, the Sylvanas we see in game before 825, we don't see her at all in 8.2, but that we have seen in 8.0 and 8.1 does not have powers that you would not expect Sylvanas to have. Her godlike one-shotting abilities, which come with very purple color, gaseous manifestations, like what looked like a mana bomb that she dropped on Sourfang, and just toying with the Lich King's weapon with, a gaseous gesture off her fingertips, while the other one just wove a spell to rip his face mask right off, and then crack open the face mask and crack open the world. These are massive powers she hasn't had before. And let's go back and look at the trail that suggests that this Sylvanas, in those two cinematics, at least doing those things, is actually Xal'atath. But that Sylvanas herself still exists and is on the run. And I think she shows up in both 825 and in 9.0 at the end of both. So let's go back to 815 and Xal'atath appearing for the first time in humanoid form. Now, if she is Lovecraft's Nyarlathotep, Azeroth version, she can take any humanoid form. Why did she pick a blood elf? A void elf? Well, it's nice to have the portals, but she's an old god. She can do that anyway. She doesn't need to be in a void elf form to do that. If she's a void elf, it's not going to stand out particularly if she's leaking a little bit of void energy, because the void elves tend to do that. Now, that doesn't show in the Crucible of the Storms pre-cinematic, but the fact that she's a blood elf, I think, is a very interesting hint, because Sylvanas is effectively a blood elf. Sylvanas was the Ranger General of Silvermoon, which is the blood elf capital. And so she shares the same genetics. The Void Elves actually come from an area in Ghostlands not far from Windrunner Spire when we meet them in the allied race scenario. That's where we pick them up. And so it doesn't take much of a stretch to say that those Void Elf blood elves are genetically probably not very different from the Windrunner family genetics themselves, and thus they would look alike and be alike. So maybe she's testing out the blood elf form before she takes on Sylvanas's particular quirks, which of course is the undead, the banshee, etc. When we see Sylvanas again after that 815 is in 825 walking out of Orgrimmar with banshee black ooze, void black ooze, and interspersed with void ribbons, I would call it. But if you look at the new toy Nyarlathotep, whatever. Anyway, Wowhead calls those tentacles, but to me, those void strips that wrap around that form look very much like the void strips that are wrapping around the black ooze that is oozing off of her fingers when she walks out of Orgrimmar to meet Sourfang. Then we, just continuing on this fact list, we see Sylvanas again in game in the Loyalist ending cinematic for 825, where she is not dripping anything. Now she's in game form, not cinematic form, I agree. But we have tons and tons and tons of abilities to, with probably practically 5 minutes work, to cast an enchant onto her gloves or boots that would make her ooze black stuff. You can ooze fire, you can ooze frost, you can ooze azurite. I'm sure they could have made her ooze some purple or black wisps off of her boots or gloves if they wanted to show consistency with the Sour Fang Sylvanas, but they didn't. She's hiding out in Windrunner Spire. People go often to hide out when they're wanted by everybody and their life is threatened. Often they go to their childhood home. She's surrounded by Banshee, which are her first and most loyal army, if you wish, lieutenants that she got when she was first killed by Frostmourne, raised as an undead, and then turned by Arthas the Lich King into a Banshee. So her Banshee are her oldest troops and probably the most loyal to her. Nathanos comes and gives us another hint. He calls her my love, which he's never done, right? He shows real emotion to her and wishes her a good trip. She has mentioned, of course, she has to leave. She can't stay in Windrunner Spire. They're going to look for her there soon. Well, his expression of affection for her is a vouching to the audience that she really is the real Sylvanas, that he wouldn't be expressing his love unless he was faking it to someone that he believed was an imposter or suspected to be an imposter. Now, the next we see Sylvanas is the 9.0 beginning of that teaser cinematic, and you see her walking onto Icecrown Citadel's front platform, oozing again the black goo, the banshee goo, the void goo off her feet. So now, here's the hint. Again, this is the superpower Sylvanas. This, I believe, may be the Xal'atath duplicate. She goes and disassembles in the logo break all the Scourge army, and then disassembles the Lich King, and then sort of disassembles the top of the planet. And then the next we see Sylvanas, it's back to in-game Sylvanas again, doing a very long, slow RP walk over to the jailer, where she then throws her Banshee again, and she's 4, not 3 Valkyr around her, which is interesting as well. And then they turn into Stormcrows or whatever, death thingies, and fly off. Now, before she Banshees, there's no sign again in that cinematic, and they could easily have done it, that she's oozing anything from her fingertips or feet. So it is possible that again you are seeing in the jailer bit at the end of the 9.0 cinematic trailer, the real Sylvanas has taken advantage of the break, or maybe she has always had the ability to go see the jailer. Who knows? She is undead. And maybe she did gain that at the Edge of Night novel events. Maybe that's the real Sylvanas coming to game up with the jailer. Maybe we don't know what the Xal'atath superpower Sylvanas, demigod Sylvanas, is actually going to do. So anyway, I think this is it's wild speculation. As a writer myself, this is a really cool story if the story played out this way. No one else that I've seen has come up with this, and yet it seems so that the hints are so obvious that this is one of the things that they could be setting up for. Now, I don't have any agreements with Blizzard or contact with Blizzard or shill agreements with Blizzard, so if they told the other guys to lay off this one, and they certainly wouldn't have told me, and they haven't told me, so here it is. Again, super spoiler, and this is something we should look forward to see if this is how it comes. Anyway, Wild Soloist out for now.